your video is pinned on my screen, so you're nice and fitting my screen, and I can only see you.
How does one do that?
Um, okay, so do you see the three dots on your literally on my face, like next to it?
No, I mean, you know what? No, I mean, can't. Yeah, I just saw.
Yeah,
I
and then
believe.
over there you can pin it.
Okay.
So I think we're going to start. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining us today. We're going to be having a conversation between Akanksha Kamath and Kallol Datta. Is a fellow UAL graduate. She went to CSM and she studied fashion communication. And I'm going to let Akanksha introduce Kallol to you. So, Akanksha, please take it away.
I'm so happy that we're doing this and talking about India by design in 2020, in this year that has been stranger than fiction. Thank you to Karishma and Megha and Jashita and everyone else who's planned this, and Kalol, who was convinced. I don't know what charms I've used, but I'm so glad that Kalol, you were willing to do this. To introduce Kalol for all of you, I think the best way to describe him is he calls himself a clothes maker, not a designer. He, you know, asks asks designers to be political and think about the politics of fashion rather than just making something for bodies. In true Kalol style, I'm wearing black today as well. And he studied at CSM, and he did a design graduation from there. And he grew up in the UAE. And all of these things have led him down the path today where he is. And I always remember his collections as the most game changing, which is why the name for this talk as well. And Kalol, we'll just dive right in. Let's talk about how your clothes have been game changing, and when you entered the Indian fashion scene, what it was like, and what was it like for you to present the kind of clothes that you did then?
Um, I don't know what the industry was like before I joined, but I remember when I started off in 2008 properly, there was a lot of us, who went abroad, who studied in design schools across Europe and North America, and we came back, and so we were armed with a lot of technical knowledge. And that's when we started off. So it was an exciting time for my generation, for observers, for viewers, consumers of fashion, to see this new school of thought. So there were a bunch of us. There was Rimzim Dadu, there was Varun Sardana, um, a bunch of us who were doing interesting work and who weren't just relying on formula based, putting out certain kind of collections out every season to check certain boxes. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that you and your generation, as such, would be responsible for how anti-fit as a movement started in clothing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I always found that term to be slightly oxymoronic because when you're looking at clothes that travel away from the body, you've got to be conscious of fit, right? Because when you're looking at a garment from a very technical perspective, you have certain balance points. So some designers use the shoulders, the armhole, the waist, whichever point of axis as their balancing point in constructing a garment. So even when you make something called oversized or anti-fit, like people say, I still call it body con because you're still conscious of the body. Because at the end of the day, if a human has to inhabit that fabric form, um, you can't be anti-fit.
Hmm.
So what I do is the way I construct my clothes, the body has to adapt to the garment and not the other way around. So I'll create a dress where the armhole is cut in such a manner it adds stress to your shoulder unless you position yourself a certain way.
Hmm.
And that's where I think that's where it started off, where I had such a love-hate relationship with, let's say, a lot of fashion media in the country because I felt there was, and there still isn't much critical thinking, and there were just very few people who you could engage um, with clothing on a visceral level. Um, but I get what you mean in the sense that nobody was doing the I'm going to hug the body and make a garment or do an A-line trapeze shape. There were other shapes coming in. I think my generation looked at a lot of non-linear ways of layering textile forms one on top of the other to create interesting shapes and silhouettes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, your actually, can you give me an example of a shape that is very Kallol for you?
I don't know. I mean, I started off with doing clothes where you couldn't take wide steps, and irrespective of gender, right? And I always have this thing: if it's a form I have to clothe, it has to be covered from top to bottom, and that's just my general, my personal aesthetic. Um, but you have clothes like I have clothes like the crab silhouette, a variation of which has been exhibited before in places. There's a D for Datta thing, which looks like a small, which looks like a lowercase alphabet D, which keeps on swinging when placed on the hanger because it has a slightly convoluted axis, so it never stays still. And so it's basically how do you modify, how do you arrest the fall of fabric, how do you change its course of direction, how do you make fabric travel in three different directions at the same time.
Mm.
um, so yeah, these are questions I keep on asking myself on the most base level, when trying to piece together a garment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always notice there's like shrouding and draping, and there's like this like a cocoon like feeling when someone wears your clothes. And I can't help but wonder, is it your beginnings or your childhood in the UAE and seeing their traditional dress? Is there any relationship with that?
I guess that the sense of creating on all enveloping forms, But what I particularly like were the shrouding and swaddling methods of even though it's like really hot, rather extreme climates, right? Your days are really hot in winter. Um, when you leave the outskirts, when you're going out towards the outskirts of the city, it gets really cold in the desert, and you still have people layering on fabric after fabric after fabric even during peak summer. And there's a method to it, there's a science to it, the way they do it. And that's what really fascinates me. So it's not just that region. Like I love, I like the Nawa region, which is North Africa, West Asia, the Korean Peninsula, and of course the Indian subcontinent. Those are the regions I focus on, with my creative research, with my practice. And I can't deal with the term Middle East because I think it's such a Eurocentric way of looking at geography. It's middle to the east of what? I mean, if you position that region um, within the scope of, let's say, Asia, it's to the west, so it's Western Asia. So I've always found it perplexing, even when I was young, that why is it called the Middle East? And that's where even semantics play a role. Where am I making garments to please the way the West wants me to make a garment? Where I've had PR houses and sales agents come to me and they look at my clothes and they're like, you need to dumb it down slightly. And this happened at Fashion Week. And
Mm.
I mean, I can take names. It was Blow PR. And they said, we want to sign you on, but then you need to dumb down your clothes. And what do you mean by dumb down? So people don't expect somebody based in India to be making clothes like this. So they would rather I talk about how I went to some far off village to source some fabric, sit with the weavers, made 20 yards of garment to create this bespoke outfit. And they wanted that story, and that's not what I'm cool with. um, I find a lot of us falling into that trap when we're making clothes, when we're presenting work, right down to what kind of music you select for your showing. We're all pandering to a certain gaze, so do I. But which gaze? What gaze?
Yeah.
That's what we have to figure out, I guess.
Yeah, no, you raise an interesting point for sure. The fact that there is that rhetoric that is very appealing to international markets for anyone coming out of India. But it's also surprising that a city like London, a fashion city like London, where the creative, the cerebral, the conceptual is actually looked up to, do not understand this side of India. It's an interesting point that you
I mean, if
raise.
you still look at, let's say, people of the subcontinent origin or designers who've gone from here and made it big, or they've become popular, even if they create cerebral work, it always has to be shrouded under heaps and heaps of embellishment. Otherwise, their works haven't really been taken to all that well. Um, and that's really sad because you end up forcing um, creatives to behave a certain way. When we all escaped and joined a vocation line because we couldn't deal with a 9 to 5 to begin with, we didn't want those expectations. And you're still facing all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about then being in India and then, marketing and selling to people here and to fashion weeks here? What was that process like? How did you explain a Kallol Datta 1985?
With me, it was, I mean, I'll talk about it separately. The marketing bit was really easy because, the way I used to look and the way I used to dress, I think that was like catnip for a lot of people. And so that always got me, most of the times unnecessary, but that also got me much needed inches in columns and, newsprint. When it came to clothes, I think the first 3 seasons, I'd have industry colleagues, like retailers, designers. They'd come to me and they'd be like, "What spaceship are you on?" And or you'd have people who were in the industry much longer come to me and say, "We'll see how long you keep on doing this for, because eventually you'll have to do a lehenga choli." And I'll do a lehenga choli any day, but I'll do it on my own terms. I'll do it the way I want to. I've always done a sari or a kurta, a salwar kameez from the very beginning. Uh, and that's what I base my entire practice off on, native wear. But I'll do it my way. I'll approach it in a certain manner, and I don't necessarily have to copy paste the Taj Mahal or some Hawa Mahal onto it to be taken as seriously, or for it to become commercially viable. So that part of educating consumers of what's available, this is the kind of clothing, how it's not going to add more inches to your frame if you're afraid of that. I think the retailers have also helped a certain way. Some of them who I've partnered with, um, they've helped a certain way. The media has also helped a certain way, where I'd start engaging with certain people who I knew would put across, who would disseminate information properly, and who would ask the right questions. Instead of asking me, "Kya cuts use kiya aapne, kya fabrics use kiye," you were sitting and watching the damn show. If you're a journalist, you shouldn't have to ask me those questions. It shouldn't even be on my press release. You watch the show. Ask me something more. Um, so we do have some really nice people who help me along. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about explaining your clothes to, I don't know, ladies of Kolkata or ladies of Delhi who would want to
So,
wear? Because I know that, you have a niche. You have a niche of a lot of women who own art galleries and they love your clothes and all of that.
I mean, I think the best decision I ever took was that I would, have personal clients, but I would refuse to. I've refused to meet anyone. So I don't meet people when they're buying my clothes. It's all over, even if they're in the same city as me in Kolkata, it's all over email or the phone. I'll refuse to meet anybody. And it's not because I don't want to afford them certain access, a certain amount of access. It's just because I'm not good with humans. So I wouldn't be very good at, selling my clothes to somebody if I was in front of them. Um, and I think that's what helps, where I don't have to visually or directly physically interact with someone. I think that makes it easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Now coming to your personal uniform, Kallol, it's black, 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 and then some more black. So,
Yeah.
can you tell me why you choose that as your fashion uniform, as your way of expression in fashion?
Well, it's just that I don't waste any time then. My all the pieces in my cupboard surprisingly have a great deal of compatibility, so I don't have to really check. I'll just pull out an upper and a lower and an overlay, and they all go with each other. So I don't have to be like, does this go together? Does this make me look fat when I'm already fat? I don't have those questions, you know. I'll just wear it and I'm out. Um, yeah, getting my work done. So primarily that, yeah, that was the reason.
Can I ask you how many pieces of black do you own?
I don't know. I had a friend come in pre-COVID to my place, and um, he opened my wardrobes, and he was like, "They're like these massive black holes just sucking you in because you can't really differentiate when everything black's hanging or folded." And yeah, so it's quite a bit. And I try to keep my clothes longer. I love it when the color fades after years and years of washing and ironing and all of that. So I like faded black garments also. I just like black, you know. I read somewhere there was this meme someone had sent which said, and I posted it as well, which said, "Why do you wear black?" And the person says, "Because primary colors are garbage." And then they're like, "Would you like to elaborate?" And they're like, "No, it's just black. Black works."
And now coming to the pandemic, COVID,
Mm.
we can't escape that question, Kallol. What has been this experience for you? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? And what has been a learning or a takeaway?
I mean, the takeaway has been that social media has shown me that designers don't know how to respond to a crisis like this. When you're making stupid masks with multiple macroscopic needle holes in them, I mean, the mask is ineffective. So stop, designers, stop making masks, you know, unless you've tied up with a tech company and you're doing like melt blown inner layers and all of that. Stop making your stupid masks. I don't care if it's organic or whatever, but just stop making them. And you've got people making masks with brooches on them for what? I mean, you know, inane. So our creative response to the pandemic has just shown that we still need press releases. We still need to put out press releases. We still need to grab eyeballs and likes and all of that. So there hasn't been any. There hasn't been. When I'm saying all this, I'm talking about creative people. There are lots of creative practitioners in India who are in the garment industry. I'm talking about those who take the route of fashion week. There are a lot of designers who take the exhibition route. There are a lot of designers who don't, who only take the retail brick and mortar route. A lot of people are just online. A lot of people do a combination or their own part. I'm talking about designers um, who interact, who use Fashion Week as a platform, who show there regularly. I'm talking about those designers, right? And I don't. So if those designers take offense, I'm okay with that. But for the others, this doesn't. It's not pertaining to you when I say you make horrible masks. Um,
Fair enough.
yeah, I mean, I just had to put in that disclaimer, you know. But I feel like our response wasn't educated. It wasn't even instinctual because you knew it came from a sense of now what, you know, now what content do I put up? I think it's a great period of time to slow down and really focus on R&D, because designers in India, when you look at people who buy clothes here, our clothes are equated a lot of times with high street brands because of price points, because of accessibility, and all of that. Uh, so let's say if you were going somewhere nearby, like even Bangkok or Singapore to buy designer clothing, we wouldn't be treated by clientele on the same level, be it price points, be it why are you so expensive? I'd rather go to a Uniqlo or a Zara and get this. So you've got to really think, you know, what product are you going to put forth? It's okay to take a breather. It's okay to not do a full collection. It's okay to engage with textile or fabric in a certain manner. And this is the time to do, because I know 80% of designers, again, those who take that fashion week route, we're all bloody privileged, right? We've all either come from generational wealth or we've taken out bank loans because we've been in a position to take out bank loans. Um, it's a good time to now focus on performing interventions via design, you know, just so that people don't keep on taking us to as people who just provide entertainment, you know, so that the industry is taken seriously. Um, yeah, I don't
And
know. I
what
just
have
went
you
off.
been? No, it's fine. It's great when that happens. What are you currently listening to? What are you reading? What are you creating right now?
Well, what am I reading? I'm rereading Angela Davis's Woman Class Race, a Woman Race
Mhm.
Class, and Kavita Krishnan's Fearless Freedom. and I'm doing a lot of, like, I always work project wise. I've never looked at it like I'm making a collection of clothes or something. So I've been doing my gallery commissions, which take up a lot of time. With clothing, I've always worked on a small scale production level, and I'm working at an even further reduced production capacity at the moment, um, which is also very good for me because I get to focus on other things. But I'm still in touch with my clients. Um, I'm still making sure I haven't created a new collection this year of clothes, so as to speak. So so just updating silhouettes and classics, my classics and my basics, and making sure that's available for people who need to, who in case if they need to add on more pieces to their wardrobe. But it's basically that I have shows lined up next year. So the preps already start a year prior to the date of the event taking place, because when you're looking at exhibiting it a certain way. So that's happening at the moment.
And that's always exciting when it comes to your collections. I feel like the presentation is a really, really important part of it. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming up.
Yeah, I mean, we always want to create this sort of bubble or ecosystem around our uh, exhibits, right? So be it right onto the music you choose, what fragrance. I used to have this habit where I'd want to hire extra air conditioning units to make it really chilly and cold, just so that people would find it slightly uninviting, or they would spend less time, or they would respond in a completely different manner. But you've got to think of ways to engage people and to ways for them to engage with your work, um, more than just in a, oh, I saw this, or anybody could do that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Mm.
a sensory overload, and it's
Has to
not
be,
only from the clothes.
yeah, has to be.
I think, should we open it up to any questions anybody has? Anything that
Yeah,
you want to add, Kallol?
no, I mean, if anyone has a question, I'll be more than glad to attempt to answer. Yeah.
Anybody? Feel free. Kallol is quite candid.
I'm just glad that you spoke about interventions because I didn't find a lot of fashion designers exploring that further in the form of interventions. Like, what can fashion be in that
Hmm.
manner? So, can you elaborate more on that? Like, what are your interventions that you like to explore?
I mean, for me, it was always about, let's say I work with native forms a lot, right? And particularly, let's say, with veiling. And I had to go to Dhaka for a show. And I put the men over there in veils. And then you had the Ministry of Culture people send over uh, officers and cops to the hotel where I was staying, because they were like, "How can you put men in veils?" I was like, "But 80% of the show audience would be wearing a veil themselves." And I said, "What's the problem? You don't like it when men are told what to wear?" Because that's my thing, where since the advent of clothing, it's always been used as a tool to repress women and other minorities. Um, and that's my thing always. Like, how do I make the majority or the dominant um, factors within fashion or around me? How do I make them uncomfortable um, when they have to interact with my clothes? Um, and that's where there's a lot of creative research, so not academic, but a lot of creative research which I do, uh, where I don't really have to provide answers, but I need to push the conversation along, and just to keep things interesting for me as well, because I'm selfish on that level, so I can't get bored doing work. So yeah.
That's nice. That's good. Thank you.
If I can ask you,
Yeah.
at this point in time, I know we have the pandemic and there are multiple other issues, but what do you think is a really important conversation for us to start? Like, as a community of makers, whatever you want to call us, like, what do you think is a very vital conversation for us to be really engaging in? And maybe, I mean, how do we start it, or just your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think is a really pressing issue that needs to be addressed to start off with?
Like I wish we lived in times where we had just one
I know.
pressing issue, and
That's the reason
you
I'm
know,
asking which one to you personally would be one that you feel like this is really there. See, pandemic
but you know
we
that's the thing.
know.
It's like a multi-headed hydra beast, you know. So uh, that's why I'm always on the edge because there are multiple things that I feel I need to focus on or I need to um, address, or if not address, then take in and then manifest that a certain way. And I feel we've been through so much in this year, this past 1.5 years in the country, within this particular country that we live in, where it's, if you want to talk about, let's say, something regarding the pandemic, um, there are other issues which feel like, oh my God, no, but I should address that as well. It's very difficult, at least for me, to choose. But I feel at the end of it all, like let's say when we're talking of output from our industry or our peers, I think we need to look at how can you make more meaningful and intelligent work. And just to keep ourselves happy, but also to uh, inform people, to educate people. Like, this is not the time when I can make a collection and be like it's inspired by love or by flowers. That's not good enough right now, because clothes makers, what are we? At the end of the day, it's we're anthropologists also on a certain level, right? If you look at past civilizations, most of our knowledge comes from what was the statue carved like, what clothes was he, she, they wearing, what was the jewelry, So clothing forms a big part of our understanding of the way we were, the way we are, the way we could be. And so when you have the person who occupies the highest political office in the country say that, you can pinpoint arsonists by the kind of clothes they wear, uh, you've got to have a response to that. And that's when clothing becomes political. So there's politics in clothing and there's politics by clothing. And how do you align yourself? And a lot of us miss a moral compass also. Uh, like we just couldn't be bothered. So I'll still make a collection based on love or some flowers or some, carry pattern I saw. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, to each their own eventually. But yeah, I think we have to almost. It's like we need to make ourselves prove so many things, right? You have to like fight with political issues that are happening, religious issues that are happening, then demonetization. So as I mean, we're also creators, but we're also businesses. So
Yeah.
how do you find that? How do you find that safe space where your work eventually becomes proof all of these different things, which is kind of what we're all dealing with right now, continuously. The last
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's always been how do I best capture the meaning of our times, right now, what's happening right now. And I'll try to do that through my work. And while the first 3 years when I started off, so let's say 2008 to 2011, that might have been tough on me financially because um, I wasn't selling as much as, let's say, what my peers were. But I've built it up to a point because I've been consistent with it. Um, where I can get away putting up whatever I want to. So today, if I showcase something on the runway, somebody else might face a lot of flack for it, but for me, they'll be like, Kallol showed it, so it's fine. Um, or to a place where I don't have the people don't have those expectations out of me. So I've built it in a way where I'm not as a brand, but I've built myself as a free agent where I can choose to engage and disengage when I want to. And I've got this thing in my head where I need to be making, let's say, X amount. My turnover needs to be an X amount. I'll work towards that. And how do I work towards that without letting my personal credibility go down the drain? And that's why I diversified laterally, where I'll seek out meaningful, meaty, like I'm really greedy with work. So I'll always seek out meaningful, meaty collaborations. Um, I'll work. I am a clothes maker, but I'll also work in with non-textile materials. Um, so yeah, so different formulas for different people, but how do you best capture the meaning of our times? So yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions, anybody? I mean, it's
Huh?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think I was muted. You were saying something. I can go after you. Hi, Akanksha and Kallol.
I
Hi.
love your
So more than
glasses. Can
more
I
than
steal them?
yeah.
Can I steal your glasses?
Oh yeah, if you can through this Zoom. So one of the it's more like not a question per se, but this is a conundrum that I always think that, especially during the pandemic, it became all the more like a lot more people started speaking how frivolous fashion is
Mm.
and how non-essential fashion is. And it's almost at one point the conversation was around that fashion is entirely responsible for a lot of evil that are happening on the planet. So what is like basically in essence fashion is essential. When is it not essential? What direction people in fashion can take? Like an artist, you would consider yourself a designer and an artist.
No, I'm just a clothes maker. But what I feel like, I think the number one reason why people don't take us seriously is because we constantly choose to engage with the lowest common denominator in India, which is Bollywood. So
Yeah.
today, let's say if I die, nobody's going to write a beautiful obit about me talking about my design practice and all of that. They'll talk once upon a time, so and so Bollywood person wore my garment. And I think that's really sad. And forget me, you look at people, people who we love. Like today, if let's say Ray Kawakubo dies, right? They're going to write about how some stupid reality show person wore her garment without talking about her body of work and how directional and how path breaking she's been consistently for years and years. And that's what we've reduced it down to. We have zero critical thinking, zero critical engagement in fashion within ourselves, and also when we interact with people outside the industry. So if you look at a vocabulary, uh, the way we talk about our work, half the time it just sounds really fake. I don't want to use the word dumb, but it sounds really fake. And that's why I find it so interesting now that traditionally, people who would not opine on fashion, now they are. So they're writing about fashion, not fashion journalists, but let's say people who would cover a political beat, or the crime beat. They're talking about fashion, they're writing about fashion. Um, and that's making us very uncomfortable because suddenly we've got to defend and justify the mediocre work that we are putting out and I
And
love
that's
that.
one of the things that keep happening, I feel, is that this justification that people in the industry always feel that they have to give
Yeah,
for what they are creating.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because an artist can paint in any other creative medium, you can do what you want to, but I think it's fashion that gets the credit of wastefulness the most.
I mean, it is right. So when designers talk about sustainability and all, I mean, if I'm making a garment, I obviously can't be sustainable in the way we think of sustainability because it's a lost cause already, um, and there's no way of pulling us back. But then we've also got cultural sustainability to think about, and I think that's fantastic. So a lot of my work grapples with cultural sustainability. But when you're looking at cultural sustainability, then what happens to cultural diversity? So notions of that. Um, and again, like I just want to come back to that entire point about the Mumbai film industry. If you have to give your clothes to somebody, don't please, because they're earning enough money to buy it off you. Secondly, if you have to engage with them, engage again with
Yes.
them on a meaningful level, because there are such amazing actors um, of all genders who do such brilliant work. They're such amazing filmmakers. Um, have your own creative agency when you're interacting with them, when you're collaborating with them. And I think that's really sad where not too many people have formed those interesting alliances or relationships. It's
Yeah.
so yeah. I mean, people think we're a joke, and I mean, half the time I agree with them. So I'm not the right person to
Likewise.
back them.
Thanks, Kalul.
Not at
Can I
all.
quickly ask a question to you, Akanksha?
Of course, of course.
Akanksha, since you work at Vogue India, I'm aware. Uh, I always feel that what Vogue as an agency, an international agency, can do about separating Bollywood and Indian fashion industry because it is such a intermingled relationship. And personally speaking, it actually irritates me also that how closely associated it is. Can India not have a fashion industry which is not so merged with Bollywood?
You know, it's a very good question, and I'll be honest, it's a question that's asked to me quite often for obvious reasons. Um, I feel like, everywhere around the world there's a music industry that supports fashion. There is other creative bubbles that support fashion, including Hollywood. In India, the pedestal that we put our actors on is above all of those other creative agencies. It is what it is. And for fashion to percolate beyond us, a group of 30 people, um, it has to be seen, it has to be heard, it has to be, you know digested in that fashion which is through film in India. What I agree with though is how Kallol said that the way you communicate it is so important, and I think that also comes down to the designers. Are you collaborating in a credible way, with a film, personality? That gives us fodder to talk about. We feed off what you do as designers as well. But I do feel like there is a responsibility in how we communicate as journalists, and it's worth rethinking that, and in fact putting our heads together as designer and journalist and coming up with something.
Great. Thank you, Akanksha. Thanks, Kallol.
Any other questions or comments?
It was a pleasure listening to both of you having a conversation and getting a perspective of what is beyond what stereotypical practices or go.
Akanksha, we can't hear you
Uh,
very well. We can't hear you very well.
okay.
Yeah, better.
Sorry. This is the strength of my microphone at the moment.
It's better now, much better.
Okay, I was saying it was a wonderful conversation to hear between both of you, and it's like a reminder of what design is, even in fashion, and like how much we need to keep ourselves focused on what it is all about, rather than getting distracted by uh, the stereotypes.
Yeah, and I think to recap Kalol's responses as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kallol, I feel like you spoke about collaboration and sort of thinking laterally when it comes to building a brand, so to speak, a brand like yourself, and credibility in what you do, using fashion as more than just clothing. It's more. It's definitely more. And any lasting thoughts that you want to add, and then I think we can pass it on to Karishma.
No, I mean, I'm good. Like, I'm good, yeah. But thank you for having me on.
No, but I have another question for you. I just wanted to ask you. So, how do you feel like the way you approach your design process, the way you approach your collections, has it changed, if at all, from when you probably came back post, being exposed to London and um, the kind of exposure that we get there? Let's accept it. The way we see fashion there and the way that we have opportunities there are quite different than what it is here. So, do you feel like it has there was any real impact of the Indian fashion industry on the way you approached, or maybe tried to approach at some point, the way you were showcasing your work, or the way you were doing your work, or the way you were speaking about your work? Was there any sort of like a shift or a change due to the industry at any point?
I think when I started off, because when I came back to India and I started the label, a lot of my friends said that they won't get your clothes. So, you can't be about just form and silhouette. You need to do something visual, add something visual on the garment. And I don't know embroidery, right? And I I remember when I used to study in NIFT, they had this embroidery classes, and I never attended any of those because I used to not naturally gravitate towards it. I can look at a garment and be like, I love it. Like, I look at, let's say, Rimzan Dadu's garment, and I'll be like, how do you do that? And that's insane. But I'd never be able to do it myself. Um, so because that pressure was there on me from people who I used to hang around with, that's why I started doing prints. I started off with prints. I used to do a lot of prints, and um, my prints also were about taking, irreverent objects and basically subversive and doing these random motif based, which then uh, everyone else started doing, and then I was like, I can stop now. I don't need to do this anymore. So I'll still engage with prints, but I'll do it if I feel it's necessary to carry out the narrative a certain way. And then I think 3 years down the line, I just decided I love making clothes, but I dislike most of the people I come across in the industry. And that's when I was like, I'll interact with them on a certain level or not with so much frequency. And I mean, I was feeling that when I was in Calcutta. So I can't imagine if any of you are in Bombay or Delhi, it must be hell. And I feel really bad, that you guys have to probably deal with so much shit. But that's why I chose to only engage on my terms. I chose to only work with people who I'd be happy working with. Uh, Even if I'm doing a fashion week, I'll make sure all my contracts are signed in place before I even leave Calcutta, just so that by the time I reach there to do my exhibit or my show, I'm happy doing it. Um, so yeah, so those were the two instances, Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that you don't do these things often. We know you don't. You've been taking some time off and you've been doing your things. But we must say that we really look up to the work that you've done, and I think you've really been a
Thank
game changer for our industry. So thank you very much, and
Thanks
thank
very
you for
much.
joining us, Akanksha. Thank you for having this conversation. And if anyone has any questions, you can still ask. We have like a minute before I actually end this call. If not, then
Yeah,
like
so I was thinking, we just had a session before this, which was talking about the Indian design spirit. So maybe we can hear from him what is the Indian design spirit on and his take about it, and what is the design spirit all about? Like, if you want to share.
The Indian design as in
Indian
what
design
spirit?
spirit.
so.
Indian design spirit.
You know how people, as like every country has this thing that you assume is associated with the country as a design. So what do you think is associated with
Oh
India?
yeah, we don't have that here. And even if we do, I feel a lot of it has less to do with fashion design and a lot more to do with textile design. Where I feel textile designers are a lot more focused and they put out stronger points of view. So, you have that where people will talk about our weaves and our embroideries and all of that. I feel what's really interesting is, but which doesn't get enough focus or which is not nurtured a certain ways. I think our product designers are fantastic in India. Um, I think we have a great a current generation of designers who do really interesting products. Uh, when it comes to fashion, we don't have a language. I mean, we can barely hold it together on a professional level anyway. So I don't think we have a spirit. I mean, the only spirit I can think of is vodka. At Fashion Week, they're all chugging it like idiots. But um, otherwise, no. I think textile designers. So I think a lot of textile designers do great work. Yeah, but fashion, I don't. Do we have a spirit? You guys can correct me. I might be wrong.
I was actually thinking about this as well. We were trying to think about like what do Indian women,
Hmm.
I'm speaking specifically of women over here right now, but what do we stand for on a global scene as well for our dress? We wear everything. We don't stand for one thing. We do everything. It has its pluses and minuses, I guess, because then there's no such global identity, so to speak. I don't know. Does anybody want to add or, you know?
We're extremely stereotyped all the time. I think it's we are stereotyped with these images that they see through Bollywood and through like maybe the Kama Sutra and things that they saw all these years. And I feel like we as a country are really adaptable. We've always adapted. We've been ruled. We've taken on different things, and that's what the discussion was going towards today. Like, do we have to keep saying that we're only a design spirit that's based off of like visual references? Can we also talk about values? But then, how do you put these values forward visually?
But
So
that's
like
also dangerous. The moment you start talking about sanskari values,
no, no,
I
no, no,
mean,
no. I'm not with sanskari values. No, no. I don't mean values as in touching people's feet, but I mean in terms of like as we've always been a sustainable country. Like sustainable is the new buzzword, I know, but as a country we've always been very atmanirbhar, right?
Hmm.
We've always done that. So does is that isn't that a value that we should be putting forth, or isn't that a value that comes naturally to us? But now somehow sustainability has become a foreign, it's a foreign thing that we've taken upon ourselves, right? No one talks about it as something that comes inherently to us, because we're so busy being just typecasted and stereotyped by paisleys and elephants and peacocks, which is not bad. I'm fine with that too, in another world, it's fine. But I feel like a lot of times the real character of, or the real values, I will say again, of who we are as a country are like, how do we bring that forward? Is it possible to bring it forward? Do we need to bring it
I don't
forward?
think we don't need to have a design spirit or a fashion spirit in the country, because every 400 miles you travel west, north, or east, it's a different country by itself. Like, I feel we should have multiple time zones in this country. But besides that, like you were saying, for me, the biggest takeaway of all of this is we need to stop screaming at younger, new designers to be sustainable, because it's expensive to run a sustainable brand. Catch hold of the corporations, catch hold of these conglomerates, people who are in the business of making clothes, your high street brands and all of them. It's like telling people who are struggling with poverty, why do you only eat junk food and why don't you have fresh fruit and vegetables? Because it's bloody expensive. That's why. So, we need to stop telling the younger generation, be sustainable, be sustainable. They figure it out. And that can't be the USP of a brand. It's already taken for granted. You need to have sustainable practices in place.
Yeah.
Your USP always has to be good design, and that's it. Nothing else matters at the end of the day. So if you're making a lehenga choli, it has to be the best lehenga choli that you can make at that point of time. And if I'm going to make a hijab, it better be the best hijab I can make at that time. I mean, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like this is a very big conversation. Like, it just goes on, and every time you hear someone's perspective about it, it's very interesting. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Cool. So I think we're good. We're good to let you go finally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kallol. You were
So,
great.
Thank
thank
you.
you, Akanksha. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
We need to stop the recording.